I don't see the point in continuing on the same trajectory, doing exactly the same things as you did the day before. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'm not someone who, and I hate that term, I'm not someone who I feel a need to have a goal. That's just to keep my fitness up. But I always like to, as you say, see new things and approach something.
Susan, I always start with this question, which is, where are you right now and what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Excellent questions, Kush. I'm going to make everybody very jealous and tell them I'm sitting in Goa. And for breakfast, I had muesli, granola with yogurt, blueberries, and kiwi fruit.
That breakfast sounds delicious, beautiful. What are you doing in Goa, Susan?
I'm trying to have as much fun as possible. So I try and swim in our pool every day. I have some great cycling buddies down here. I've just finished a 3-day kayaking course with my husband, who has never really kayaked before. So that was fun. So I'm actually just enjoying semi-retired life.
Beautiful. Susan, you are in Goa and you currently live in India.
Correct.
But before that, you grew up in Australia and you've had these adventures all over the world. Did you ever imagine India becoming part of your story?
No, I did not. No, I absolutely did not. I came here in 2007 to work on the Commonwealth Games, which was possibly the biggest adventure of my life, but not necessarily the best one, and for reasons I won't go into. But I met my now husband 2 weeks after I arrived, and I had no intention of staying, but the rest is history. So, kind of nearly 20 years later, I'm in India and continuing the adventure journey.
I love it. You came to India, you met your future partner right away, and then somehow you decided to continue living in India.
Yeah, it's would have been a bit hard not to. I've seen people do it, but for me, living in one place and being married to somebody in another place is not for me. And I waited until I was 53 to meet Mr. Right. So I guess I didn't really want to be living apart from him.
One thing that I find delightful about your story is that you have not been shy of starting things late and then excelling in them. So maybe there is some thread that runs through your athletic accomplishments and beyond. And I would love to tap into that thread a bit more because you're in India and it's a place that I often don't have people on this podcast coming from. What is one thing about India, Susan, that you have found that you like that people outside may not know about?
India is full of probably the most adventurous people I know. People here do not have, they do first and think afterwards. I have seen women in Indian dress jumping on a jet ski on the beach, going out in the surf, who patently can't swim, but just trust that they're going to have a good time. And the guy who's the instructor on the jet ski, or the guide, is chasing after them as this woman goes. I've seen trekkers on the way to, quite a serious trek to Topova and Shivling, the Gangotri. And they had no business being on a trek. They were half crippled, but this was a religious trek for them. And they didn't stop to think, what am I doing here? This was just, an adventure. And it's that mentality of, I'm just going to go out there and do it. Sadly, it also means that they'll cross the road without looking at oncoming cars, or, there's a certain disregard for discipline and safety. But I just find it quite refreshing. But I think if I was to say what I like about India, it is the people. The people are, Delhi's a bit tougher where I normally live, where we live most of the time. It's a very dog eat dog kind of world. And cycling in Delhi is another level. I do most of my cycling in Delhi just because I live there most of the time. And I say to all my friends overseas, I will never get Alzheimer's because my reaction times to this kind of traffic and tuk-tuks cutting across and buses trying to mow you down and cars that go straight through red lights, and, it's okay. I'm never going to get Alzheimer's. But, that's part of the fun of it, I suppose.
Susan, I just love your energy. And I can already sense that this is going to be one of my favorite conversations. Just
Oh,
delighted to have you here. And your reflection, it's a little too close to home, I'm afraid, because I'm from India myself, and most of us, including me, think of, well, I shouldn't say most of us, some of us, including myself, sometimes think of Indians being timid when it comes to adventure. But you are breaking my brain a bit, because what the things you're saying are actually absolutely true. Yes, yes. All those things that you're saying about Indians doing first and thinking later are absolutely true, I think. And yes, I mean, what some people might call, I don't know, recklessness, might
Foolhardiness.
actually be this be this untapped potential for for adventure. Talking of which, you have described yourself as someone of very average ability with an overdeveloped sense of adventure, and I sense that there are people listening who will relate to this. Out of everything that you've done, and you've done many things, what are you most proud of?
It would relate to various times in my life. I know that when I finished the Ironman, I felt I felt invincible, that I could do anything, because it was so far away from my perspective at that point that I could do something like that, that I thought, whoa, that's it. I'm just, I can do whatever. And I think that probably informed a lot of other things that I did afterwards. So that was really quite important. I mean, the other thing that I think was quite extraordinary was that I did the Eco Challenge in Borneo in 2000. For people who don't know about the Eco Challenge, it's a adventure race, and it's a destination-based adventure race. And ours was in Borneo. It's been held in Patagonia. It's been held in various other places. It's now stopped, I understand, because it was so dangerous. Started by a guy called Mark Burdett, who most people would know as the person who started Survivor, the television program. And it was tough. It was kind of like he set out a course that was already tough and then tried to make it 40% tougher. And so it was teams of four, 10 days in Borneo in the heat. We crossed open oceans in open paraus, outrigger canoes. We pushed and cycled through rainforests. We jumared up a 100-foot rope in the middle of a cave filled with bat droppings, which could have killed us at any time. We went down rivers in kind of open wooden boats that capsized all over the place. It was like a scene out of MASH, all these people falling out of boats everywhere. So, I mean, there were 75 people who started, I think, and I think 25 finished, 75 teams. 20 finished, 25 finished, we came 20th, but I didn't care. We finished and we were left standing. But I was so proud of that, only because I lasted, and it wasn't easy. And with respect to any of my team members who may still be listening to this, it was tough dealing with three Australian blokes who, at the end of the day, were blokes. And they were monosyllabic. There was very little communication. There was very little sense of fun. If you were able to talk to the other competitors, it meant you weren't trying hard enough. The objective kept changing. I'd signed up for something that was to just finish and, enjoy each other's company. And by the time we arrived at the start line, it's like, right, we're going to be top 10. It's like, really? No one consulted me. All that sort of stuff. And the dynamics of that were really quite tough as a single woman in that environment. And so I kind of had to suck up a lot of what I really felt, even down to, once when I was right about the navigation, and I was completely overruled by the chap I was in the pair with. And we ended up having to co-steer over sea urchins, an ocean that had, it was literally just covered in sea urchins. I had purple marks all over my legs from the poisonous spikes of the sea urchin for months. And yet, I wasn't allowed to have an opinion. Now, I apologize in advance if any of them are listening to all of this, but it was just tough. And they'd probably say, oh, she was a cow, or she was a, but, am I allowed to use that language? Anyway, at one point, one of the guys said, you're a tough bitch. And I went, yeah, I pretty well am. That's a badge that I will wear about now, because it was so tough. So that was something I was really proud of, just to get through that and to finish, kind of healthy and relatively healthy. Oh, by the way, half the field were carted off with a thing called leptospirosis, which is a very deadly disease it's like Lyme disease carried by cows and whatever. It's from wildlife or fauna in rivers, kind of urinating or whatever in rivers. And there was a worldwide medical alert sent out for anybody who participated in the race, because they were dropping like flies from this leptospirosis. Anyway, that's a long story. So I guess those two things I was proudest of. And then, of course, Everest, because everybody thinks that's the pinnacle. Not necessarily for me, but it was a thing I was proud of again to finish.
Susan, that was an interesting bit of commentary about surviving the eco challenge, right?
Uh-huh.
And I guess for folks who don't know, I think eco challenge predated the Survivor series, and maybe it was the same producer, this crazy iconic man who started this. The point about, when one looks at adventure sports today, I think they have really, like, gender dynamics have shifted so quickly in the last few years, but often you still see more men than women for all kinds of reasons. But I can imagine 25 years ago, the ratio was even more lopsided. And I am imagining that men back then took even more liberty with doing and saying things that they wouldn't say and do today. And yeah, I'm just awed. I'm just awed at both the, I suppose, your tenacity at completing these very difficult parts of the race over a long period of time, but also being able to do that in that, 7 by 24, like, companionship of
Mm.
that kind of dynamic. So honestly, what are you more proud of, like being able to thrive despite it, or
Yeah,
being able to endure the athletic requirements?
I didn't think about the athleticism of it. And I think, I'm very flattered to be invited onto your program because I don't see myself as an athlete. But I guess given some of the stuff I've done, that is the tag that one might put on me. But I was really only conscious of the dynamics. I was just wanting us to kind of get through. I'm very good doing stuff on my own. I am anything that requires grunt, I can go for hours, days, not a problem. Skill I'm okay at. This was a this was probably the first time that I'd had to do something in a team that at the same time we were pushing ourselves to extremes. And that has a lot of implications. And so learning to suck that up. Don't get me wrong, they weren't being politically incorrect. They weren't, saying things. In fact, I'd rather they had said things. They were just monosyllabic. They were just grunting, like there was very little conversation at all going on. Oh, and by the way, there were teams. You had to be a team of 4, but you could be 3 women and 1 man. You had to have one person in the opposite gender. And in fact, there was a team Playboy in this particular race. Now, I won't be in any way sexist. They were quite athletic girls, and they didn't make it to the end. Yeah, it probably was a different dynamic for that poor chap who was racing with them. It was really tough, mainly because we were putting everything out there. It was really tough. When you're pushing a mountain bike through mud uphill in a forest, like a rainforest, and mud, kind of up to your knees, and pushing the bike over logs, it was insane, completely insane. You're doing that for like 2 days. And you sleep where you can. We had hammocks that had to be tied into trees because of all the ants, and it was so dangerous. But I always assume they just put these races on knowing that there is a certain level of safety. But I'm not so sure anymore. I think that they were pushing the envelope a bit back there. I don't think you could carry. I'm fairly sure that race doesn't exist anymore because it was pushing the envelope of what was totally safe.
Susan, where do you get this tenacity, this ability to endure? Like, how did you gain this
Mhm.
this quality, this temperament?
Again, an interesting question, and I had to think about it. I didn't know you were going to ask it, but I think because I grew up in an Air Force family. My father was in the Royal Australian Air Force, and we travelled around a lot. And I learned to be quite self-sufficient and a bit gobby, if I might be so bold, gobby being a bit loud and, kind of out there. Because when you move to a new school, when move to a new neighborhood, you either sink or swim. You either, become an incredibly timid, shy child, or you learn to do things on your own, you enjoy your own company, you make your own way. And it does give you a certain tenacity, I think. So, the other side of it is bloody mindedness. I will just continue at something longer probably than I should sometimes. But I don't, well, who knows what shapes our psychology, but that's the best I can think of that may have triggered my determination.
Did you have others in your family growing up who were athletic and adventure driven and may have given you company or mentorship?
No, I had an older brother until just recently, and he was He was a loner, but again, that was informed, I think, by his life and what the Air Force life did, because he went to boarding school. I didn't. And I don't think he ever quite recovered from that experience, and he was always a loner. He liked, going off on the boat and going, fishing and, kind of staying away for days. And so that's just who he was. But it's interesting how those really early experiences, I think, shape us.
Susan, again, on the outside, when I look at your list of accomplishments, what strikes me most is the variety. When you set out on this path of choosing these wild things, did you ever imagine that you would accomplish this colorful, wide ranging resume?
No, and it certainly was not planned. I think so. So should I give you a little bit of history? Up until the time I was 30, I was pretty well a workaholic, and smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and generally kind of like that was my life. And then I gave up smoking when I was 30, and I thought, oh, I better do something, otherwise I'm going to get very fat. So I just happened to be watching with a friend of mine the Julie Moss famous crawling across the line in the Hawaiian Ironman. I don't know if you've ever seen that scene. Most triathletes have, at least. And she couldn't stand. She ended up being passed by 2 other runners, but she dragged herself. Like she was drunk. She was very dehydrated, and when she came across the line, she subsequently married Mark Allen, who was probably the second most famous Ironman triathlete in the world, next to Dave Scott. Anyway, that inspired me. I thought, oh, that's something that I can do too. So I knew I could swim. I mean, all Australians can swim. That's not hard. And I'd never really run, ever. And I thought, well, anyone can ride a bicycle. So I just set off training for that. When I finished that, I got into a period of my life that became more and more competitive with triathlon, because I sort of thought, okay, I know I can go a very long way. I know I can do, a 180-kilometer bike ride and a 42K run and a 4K swim. But can I go faster? Because in my mind, I'm not an athlete. In my mind, I am a normal human being who just happened to be able to pull it out of the bag and do this Ironman triathlon. So I then focused on shorter distances to see if I could go faster. And then did that in a fairly systematic way. Got myself a cycling coach, got myself a running coach, got myself not so much a swim coach, but an overall triathlon coach, and focused on that, and managed to sort of get to a couple of world championships in Olympic distance triathlons, shorter distance. And I realized after a while that, well, after about 10 years really of doing more and more of these triathlons, that is a very narrow mindset. I don't know how many triathletes you know, but we all tend to be type A personalities, tend to be very focused, very boring. Really, at the end of the day, it's all about, the only conversation is about the latest bike, which is, by the way, still a conversation I love talking about, but the latest run splits, or, negative splits, or, the technology, and et cetera, et cetera. But a very narrow world. And I just thought, there's more to life than this. And so I started doing more off-road triathlons. And in order to do those, you start to have to learn new skills. So I've got the biking, I've got the cycling, I've got the cycling, running, swimming. So then I started doing kayaking, because that's included in a lot of stuff. I started doing mountain biking, and I'm the age of 45 by this stage when I first get on a mountain bike, or maybe a little bit younger. And trust me, that is not the age you want to learn to mountain bike. You want to be, kind of 10 years of age on a BMX throwing it around the car park. You don't want to be getting on a mountain bike and going, oh my God, that's a long way down. I came to adventures out of wanting to get away from a very narrow channel of triathlon. As much as I love triathlon, but and there's a denouement to that. There's an ending to that we'll come back to, hopefully. And so out of that grew all the other adventurous things. So, I signed up for one race in China, the Mile 7 adventure race, and I had to learn to rollerblade for that. As it turned out, my father passed away, so I couldn't actually go to the race. But yeah, it's like, okay. So that was, again, in a team of four, four people, and it was mountain biking, it was rollerblading, it was trekking, it was, a whole bunch of different things. And then I started to learn the skills base started to expand. And for me, as I look back on it, I was applying what I learned in business to sport. I was applying all my career lessons to sport. Now, in my experience, most people do it the other way around. Most people start out as kids being really good, having some sort of talent for sport. I bet you did, kind of when you were at school, and you develop that as you go on. And then it tends to slide when you get into a career and your work life and whatever. But because I did things completely back to front, I was able to apply those lessons. I thought, okay, so I will find the best person I can to teach me how to do this thing, how to perform well in this sport. I will research the hell out of it. Actually, I did, a lot of research into various things I was doing. I enjoy that process, and so yeah, I just kind of think that's how my approach to adventure developed. It was just a logical progression of away from triathlon, which I'd started, which was just a happenstance, but then applying those kind of life work lessons to sport was what got me to where I was, and I guess to achieve some excellence in things.
I sometimes like to think of humanity consisting of two kinds of people. There are people who say no, and there are people who say yes. And in
Mm.
my mind, you squarely belong in the latter camp. You saw something struck a fancy, you dove in, and then opportunities, doors kind of came your way, and you just kept saying yes to them. Yeah, and I'm just wondering there, for people out there listening, why is it important to say yes to things that might be uncertain and scary, but could lead
Mm.
to new things?
I think that is absolutely the key to agelessness, if you want to call it that, staying young, but also leading a really good life. Sort of, I have a friend, I hope he lives in America now. He's British. I hope he's not listening to this, but he's like the head of sponsorship for the North Face. So he could well be listening to it. And, he does all the commentaries for UTMBs, and he does, he's an expert skier, expert biker. Actually, you should get him on your program. He's about, I don't know, mid-60s now, I guess, early 60s, but does everything outdoorsy. And I met him during the Eco Challenge, and we've been great mates ever since and have raced together on various things. Anyway, so I took him one day to a cocktail party. I can't even remember why on earth we were both going to be at a cocktail party. He was terrified, absolutely terrified. Like, this is back in the day. Now he's much more socialized. And it struck me that what is completely natural for me, because in my business life, I had to attend so many cocktail parties, I had to give so many talks, I had to do it. It was terrifying for some people, but he did it, and he went out of his comfort zone, and it was something new. And he's I'm sure never looked back, because he has to go to lots of functions and things with the North Face. But to me, I don't see the point in continuing on the same trajectory, doing exactly the same things as you did the day before. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'm not someone who, and I hate that term, I'm not someone who I feel a need to have a goal. That's just to keep my fitness up. But I always like to, as you say, see new things and approach something. So the kayaking course, for example, my husband and I are going on an Arctic cruise. Now, we could just go on an Arctic cruise and we can sit on the boat and we can wave at the whales as they go by, or we can get in a kayak, a sea kayak, and get out there and sea kayak from the ship and get into close to the icebergs, etc. That requires, I've done a lot of kayaking, but my husband hasn't. So it required him to learn these new sports. I have to say, my husband, I'm just a shout out to my husband at this stage, because I've dragged him off on a lot of adventures since I've been here, and learning a lot of new things. So he comes from cycling. He's doing open water swims now. It's funny, but I've dragged him off on the kayaking trip. Now, to me, I'm sure he felt a little bit uncomfortable when we hit the waves, on the open sea off Goa yesterday, but he took it all in good part. So he's also someone who is happy to try something new. He's exactly the same age as I am. He's 68. So it's not linked to just people who are athletes. It's just a way of looking at things, being prepared to take on something new that's going to maybe give you, a different perspective on life.
Yeah, for sure. And when I look at your trajectory again, you kept starting new things. You talked about starting mountain biking in your 40s, and actually, I'm a kindred spirit. And same thing, I purchased the mountain bike right when COVID started, and
Oh, that's
it was exhilarating and terrifying. And as people get older, they sometimes narrow down. and there is this shift that happens. Maybe it kind of creeps up on you. You or one resists starting new things. One starts kind of looking at challenges a little bit differently, but you break that mold. So, what is it about you, Susan? Like, what made you want to buck that trend?
I don't think it's anything conscious. And I also have to say, you're quite right. I do find myself catastrophizing a lot more than I used to. And not for myself, but for my friends, because I've been doing stuff for a very long time. And when I drag my friends out with these sorts of things, or even my husband, I am terrified for their safety. I'm thinking of all the things that could go wrong. And I have to stop doing that because it's not healthy for me and not healthy for them. They've also got to learn, and I'm sure I wouldn't take them somewhere that was unsafe, but you don't know other people's limitations. I know my own limitations. I know what I do in a crisis, but you don't know other people. Although my husband, I found out one day what happens in a crisis. We were scuba diving off Byron Bay in Australia, and he'd only just learned to scuba dive in India, actually, in the Andaman Islands. Beautiful place if anyone ever wants to scuba dive. And this was our first dive after he'd been qualified, I think. We went out on the boat and got in the water. Funny anecdote, Rajiv thought to himself, God, the fish are really small in Australia. They'd given him a set of goggles, replacement goggles, because his were leaking, that had a powered number on them that was he's swimming around going, God, these fish, they're about this big. Anyway, so at one point, I feel I'm not getting any air in my metal block. Anyway, air in my whatever it is, you put in your mouth, metal block. Anyway, and I start going like this to the dive master comes up and he goes, okay. And I go, and he looks at my gauge, and I don't use much oxygen when I'm scuba diving. And he goes, yep, it's okay. And I go, yeah, I know, it's like weird. So anyway, I'm just still with Rajiv, we're butting up, and suddenly my mask starts sucking to my face, which is a dead giveaway that no oxygen is coming through. And I'm still looking down at my gauge, and I'm showing me plenty. Anyway, so at that point, I go like this to Rajiv, who doesn't blink an eyelid. He just stops what he's doing, takes out his octopus strap, which is the spare breathing apparatus. I grab it, and we wait there until the dive master comes over. And I thought, wow, okay, this guy's a keeper. I think we'd been married maybe only a couple of years. I thought, yeah, he's pretty cool in a crisis, so I'll keep him. Oh, by the way, the reason that happened for people who are divers, and it's a trap to remember, normally you would turn your air on full and then take it back half a turn before you get in. And I went to set up my equipment not knowing that they'd already done it. So what I did was turned it off fully and only back half.
Oh.
So what happened was my gauge was showing it was full, but the air wasn't coming through. So always double check that somebody else hasn't tried to set up your equipment before you've got it.
Certainly. Susan, yeah, very interesting on how your partner, your husband, has joined you, has been convinced to be your ally in these adventures. I'm wondering if you have any tips to share on how to convince one's partner willingly to some unknown adventure, because I think there are many of us in that boat where we might want to go and do something that feels crazy, and we would love for our partners to come around, because a lot of these things that we do are they're not just sports, they are these very immersive, time consuming things, and they would just be more rich if our partners came along, but they will not often be convinced if they don't do the same thing. So what have you learned that can help us?
Well, I have a secret weapon. I encourage his golf. I push him out the door and I say, I love being a golf widow. So I have a lot in the bank, because as far as he's concerned, it's like, oh God, he doesn't have to consult me. All the other husbands have to consult their wives before they commit to this golf game or that golf game or whatever. And so I think there's a lot of goodwill that's been built up in the bank. And so he will generally try most things with me. And also, we're at a stage in our lives where we probably have a bit more time to do things together, as well as him being able to do his thing on his own and me doing my thing on my own. And when we come together, it's a bit of fun. I think he's quite adventurous in many ways as well. I mean, he's not an adventurer. He's not a natural kind of adventurer. He's Indian. He likes his comforts. He comes from the Punjab. Loves his food and his whiskey and his golf and his cigars, by the way.
Like anything else, the passage towards most things find its way through age-old wisdom in finding balance and understanding what the other person needs. And talking about balance, these pursuits that you have been doing, they require enormous efforts in terms of making time, money, energy, maybe even recovery. Any sacrifices you've had to make to be able to live this life?
You know, I could honestly say I don't think I've made any sacrifices. And I think I started this by saying it's a very selfish, maybe I didn't, it's a very selfish life I'd led up until when I came to India and met my husband. Selfish in the sense that I was only responsible for myself. I could choose to do what I wanted to do. I had a very good career, so I had enough money to kind of indulge my passion of triathlon and then adventure racing and then climbing and whatever else it might be. I was able to be self-sufficient. And then I guess when I met my husband, I had to think about life as a couple. And I'm still navigating that, nearly 20 years later. All my formative years were on my own. I could do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And then I guess it's not a sacrifice. It's just sometimes I have difficulty juggling, particularly in an Indian context. And you'll appreciate this because you come back to India from time to time. On the one hand, people say, oh, it must be fabulous having staff to do this. And it's like, yep, coming home without having to cook is fabulous. But it brings its own, kind of not stresses, but there's always somebody around you in the house. I'm used to being on my own, there's a a cleaner and a cook. And we have a very small staff compared to most Indians whom we know. But it's still having to organize my life with Rajiv, organize his life, organize all of our travel, whatever it might be. It's not tough. It just takes a little more juggling, if you like. So I can honestly say I've never had to make any sacrifices for my career, although I would say that my employer probably made a sacrifice when I was training for the Ironman, because if there are any listeners out there who are employing triathletes, never let them sign up for an Ironman, because you won't get their full attention. They'll be sitting at their desk falling asleep. They'll be thinking about the next meal. They'll be thinking about their next training program, next training session. Yeah, it's not good to be an employer of an Ironman triathlete, I think.
Well, I relate to all of the things you said. I mean, I don't live in India, but I completely understand this mixed bag of comforts and also stresses that come with the society and culture that you speak about. Have you had to consciously adapt to the kind of adventures and challenges you seek since you moved here? Because, like you said earlier, or we talked about, Indians have some sort of yen for taking chances and doing things, but otherwise, it's not a very sporty country. How have you adapted?
Firstly, I think you would be surprised how sporty India is amongst a certain, I guess, maybe socioeconomic group, but that group is growing larger, the sort of middle class. Nehru Park, which is the biggest park in Delhi, for example, you can't move for the cars there, particularly on a weekend morning with all the joggers. Everybody now runs. And it's the progression that I saw in the West, where people start off with a 5K run, then they do a 10K run, then they do a half Ironman, they do a half marathon, then they do a marathon, then they do an ultra run. Now, you'd be amazed how many people are doing ultra runs in India, like just amazed, considering it's not a natural thing that one would expect. Then what they do is they start doing triathlons. So then they most of them start with a half Ironman for whatever reason, then an Ironman. And then sadly enough, the next thing they want to do is go and climb Mount Everest, because they think of it as being a fitness thing, a tick box, not something that needs to be taken seriously with the right skills and the right training and the right, kind of mindset. But overall, I think Delhi is, notwithstanding the traffic and the pollution and the most polluted city in the world. Apparently my lifespan has been reduced by 7 years because of living in Delhi, which is okay when you're 45 or when you're 30 or whatever. Not when you're 68. It's like, damn, I could do a lot more with those 7 years, but that's what you do when you live in Delhi.
Susan, we talked about age. We have to maybe start doing some things differently. Any practices, habits, routines you care to share that allow you to stay fit, strong, and agile so you can keep pushing the envelope with some of these things you do?
Okay, so I firstly feel really grateful. And I do wake up every day feeling grateful for what my body can do, because I haven't had a reason to stop and think I'm getting old. And that's, that's a lot to be grateful for. I can still do stuff. I may not go as fast, but, I can still beat most people. Not that I'm trying to beat people, but you know what I mean? Functional strength training 3 times a week. I've done that for, I don't know, many, many years, probably since I first came here, 20 years. It used to be weight training. In fact, even before I came to India, but then I moved into more functional training. So I still do a little bit of weights, but more, body weight training and things geared towards mobility and kind of strength for what I want to do. So cycling strength without getting injured. It's all about not getting injured for me. So
Care
3 times
to
a week.
sorry to interrupt. Care to many people
Sorry.
will not know what functional training is. So care to tell us a bit more about what it is that you do with that. Why did you shift to this type of training over maybe more conventional types of cross training?
Well, I do cross train as well, but just in the weights part of things, or the strength functional training, it is all about injury prevention. And for me, simple weight training builds strength. It doesn't necessarily counter the sort of stresses on your body that come from doing a lot of other things. So most functional training is compound exercises. So you're not just working one body part with a weight. You would be kind of it's hard to imagine. So bands, using bands is a great way, which is to build up strength, but you're also working antagonistically with a lot of your muscles. A lot of what one does as a triathlete, and certainly a lot of the sports that I do, is very linear. And that's really bad for us as we get older, because you need to be able to move, you need to be able to twist, you need to be able just to live life so that you don't fall over and break something. A lot of the exercises I will do bring about that sort of change. Also, a lot of what I do is bending forward. So I'll be doing a lot of things that try and get my scapula back. The compound exercises, again, a lot with bands, but also some free weights and kind of using body weight on benches and things like that. But to try and just counter what I'm doing in the other kind of training for a sport that I'll be doing. So I sort of keep up a consistent swimming, cycling, only a little bit of running, because, well, actually the one setback I had for a second was that I have a labral tear in both hips, which is more in one hip than the other hip. Basically, it's where your socket in your hip, the lining of that breaks away or breaks down. And is torn. So apparently quite common in endurance athletes, quite common in older people who've done a lot of stuff. I don't want a hip replacement, but I was told again, during COVID times, because I started running thinking, I've got to do something. Just after COVID, I beg your pardon. And the orthopedic surgeon said, why on earth do you want to run? You can cycle, you can swim. And I said, because I want to run. It's in my head. I want to be able to run. And so I found this amazing physiotherapist, who's now living in Canada, by the way. Should you ever need an amazing physiotherapist, he topped the exams in India for practicing both in Canada and in America. Ankush Sekri, genius. Anyway, he gave me a set of exercises, diagnosed exactly, he knew what the problem was. And he said, these 5 minutes worth of exercises are now your medicine. You have to do them every day if you want to keep doing what you're doing. And it's simple, exercises to build up my glutes, to mobilize the muscles around my hips before I do anything. And it literally takes 5 minutes. That sort of commitment to it does increase as you get older. I remember back in the day, I never stretched before or after doing anything. Now, religiously, I have to, because I just have to. I also religiously get a massage once a week. And it was something that I had to convince my husband is a good idea. He said, oh, no, I've been told that you can only have deep tissue massages once a month. And I went, yeah, rubbish. And now he does too. So it really is something that I think everybody, as you get older, needs, just to keep everything, fairly mobile. I do Pilates twice a week. I've gone back to Pilates. When I'm training for something, a lot of this goes by the wayside because I don't have time to do everything. But I have a really good reformer Pilates teacher in Delhi. And again, my husband started coming, and it's helping his golf. So, there's lots of advice and help out there to keep us on the road. I don't take a lot of supplements, but I take magnesium, particularly because of the weather in Delhi. And anybody doing any endurance training or any training, I think, should be on a good magnesium supplement. I try to get everything else I can from actual food. I don't take collagen supplements. I don't take protein powders. I'm pescatarian. I haven't eaten meat since I was 15, which no one believes because I'm a big strapping Australian girl, but it's never been a problem for me. So I just don't eat meat. Sits well in India because so many people are either vegetarian or don't eat at least beef. And the only other supplements I take is colostrum, which is I don't know if should I explain what it is for listeners, or would most people know
Go
what
ahead.
colostrum is? It's actually the first free milk that's produced by every mammal, but the one that and it's produced by females before their milk, before they start lactating, and it's kind of like a clear serum. But the one that I get, and you have to be very careful about this, it's got to be ethical because it's taken away from the cows only after the calf has been weaned, and that they leave enough there for the calf to be weaned, but they dry it out, and it's just like dried milk powder, but it's really good for any sort of gastrointestinal issues and dealing with stress of life, but also it's brilliant for muscle building. And for women over 40, it's almost impossible to build muscle. You just got to keep what you've got. And that's, I found quite important. Oh, and the only other thing I take is brain health supplements. So that's anybody over the age of 55, according to the neurologist that I spoke to, should be taking these things. So it's vitamin E, vitamin B12, omega 3 and 6, and folic acid. So those things should be taken. I think have I missed anyone? They're all the things that should be, and calcium. Calcium. Yeah. So good for your brain, plasticity to this whole. My mum died of Alzheimer's. Well, not Alzheimer's actually. It was Lewy bodies dementia. So I'm very conscious of trying to keep the brain a bit loose and flexible.
Thank you for walking us through, I guess, a lot of your vital regimen. About your functional training, are you self-trained or do you work with a coach?
Yeah, I've got a brilliant. He's a strength conditioning coach, basically. Indian ex-national 400-meter runner. I met him when I think the first year I was in Delhi, just looking for kind of a running coach, a strength coach, and maybe a running coach. And we have been great friends ever since. Oh, and the best thing is, he comes to my mother-in-law as well. In fact, the whole family. In fact, I've got him going to everybody. My poor Indian family, they've been dragged into this life of mine. So he is the personal trainer to my husband and I 3 times a week. My husband and me. My mother-in-law, my 92-year-old mother-in-law, once a week. And he does
Wow.
exactly the same things with her that he does with us, only slightly modified. So I bought her a little pair of pink barbells, or about kettlebells, or about this big. They're so cute. She swings them around and she does all of that. She does, ball stuff, a big, kind of fit ball stuff, but lying on a bed. But she's still doing the hamstring curls and what have you on the bed. She's remarkable. When she comes here to Goa, she's in the pool every day. In Delhi, she's in the Gymkhana Club pool every day, walking, doing her exercises, only for half an hour, but it's her daily routine. Now, you talk about adventurous Indians. She's a 92-year-old Indian woman, came through the partition from Lahore in Pakistan. She has every reason to just sit quietly and wait for life to end. There's no way that's happening with my mother-in-law. I've got role models around me.
Beautiful. Susan, you have obviously learned so much over the years, and you seem to have this, veritable cocktail now of like things you do with your body and things you do with your diet and things you do with your daily practices. When you look back, is there something you feel you could have started doing even sooner, perhaps in your 40s, 50s, maybe? I mean, obviously, you are still performing at a high level, but is there something that you think you could have started back then that could have been even better for you now?
Well, I certainly should have stopped smoking. Shouldn't have ever started smoking in the first place, I think. Actually, there's something that is the obverse of that. And it's something that I've dropped and I shouldn't have. I started meditating in Australia before I left. So I started in, I don't know, 1995, just before the World Championships, actually. And I was in a really stressful job in advertising in Australia. And for me to sit quietly for 15 minutes was nothing short of a miracle. And so it was a practice that I kept up all the way through, like in Australia. Then I left Australia, moved to England to work on the Commonwealth Games over there in Manchester, and that's how I discovered the Lake District and climbing, and lots more kayaking. It's a whole other story. Continued all the way through there as a daily practice, and then when I came to India, it stopped. Now, how bizarre is that? Because most people come to India to learn meditation. But it's just because I wasn't in control of my own life and my own time the way I used to be. Trying to find time on your own in India has been very hard for me. I find it very difficult when there's people around me just to switch off and say, I'm shutting you off, I'm going. It's not the way I've been brought up. And to be able to carve out the time to meditate, that has been hard. And I go back, and I've got a great meditation teacher in Delhi, and I go back to her from time to time and kickstart things. Now you've reminded me, actually, I've reminded myself I'm going to get back into it. But there's very little, I think you learn things, you find things as you need them. I don't think there's anything I would have started earlier. I was doing yoga, I was doing, a weekly massage back when I was, doing triathlons heavily. That was in my 30s. So no, I think, I've always been aware of Pilates, yoga, things that are good for you. So no, I don't think so.
It sounds a little bit backwards that, the world seems to at least want to come to India or at least India exports this brand of this identity, which includes a lot of meditation. But I will also have to agree that the environment here can also make it a little challenging to be able to find that peace and quiet. Or maybe that's the level of meditation that I can't aspire to yet, because I have a small practice of my own. And apparently people tell me that next level practitioners can find that mental space no matter where they are. I can't either.
Yeah, me either.
I
I like a quiet room.
I have another slightly contrarian question for you. You went ahead and you did all these different sports, Susan, like all kinds of things that we have spoken about. Do you think there was a cost there where if you had maybe chosen to just stick with the triathlons or the adventure races or something else, where you would have maybe accomplished some sort of next level excellence?
Well, actually, to go back to something I said, maybe we'll, kind of roll back to that. The last thing on earth I expected to be doing was triathlons at this stage. Now, I mean, back in the day, I thought, yeah, I'm going to keep doing triathlons all the way through. Then, as I said, after 10 years, it was like, oh, these people are so boring. I'm just going to get and so rigid and whatever. But then here I am in India. 3 years ago, a girlfriend of mine says, I'm turning 50. I want to do a half Ironman. Can I do it? But she couldn't even swim properly at that stage. Certainly had never swum in the ocean. And this is, maybe 9 months before the race. And then another girlfriend was in the same boat, and she certainly couldn't tread water, let alone. But anyway, I signed up on the basis that I said, yeah, you can do it. You can do it. India adventurousness. I said, look, I'll come and do it with you. So I thought, how hard can it be? Anyway, so I signed up for this race and go, a half Ironman. And it is the hottest thing I've ever been involved with, notwithstanding the fact it was 50 degrees when I ran the Marathon des Sables, in the Saharan desert, carrying all my own gear. At least there was a breeze blowing. And this is Goa in whatever it was, October. I've never felt anything like the heat. And there were jellyfish as well. That's a whole other story. So I get out of the swim, get on the bike, and I find out from my husband, as I come around on one of the bike loops, that the girls have made the swim cut off. So I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. So that really sort of spurred me on. Kept going, cramped really badly on the bike. So bad, I had to stop 2 or 3 times. Obviously not taking on enough fluid. Rookie mistake, didn't take any salt tablets. Also had not trained enough, and it was quite a hilly course, which I'm thinking, go, it's flat. Actually, it wasn't. The course was not flat. And so, by the time I got to the transition to get off the bike, I couldn't even get off the bike. And my husband was standing there and saying to one of the marshals, she can't get off the bike. I literally was standing astride the bike. I knew if I lifted up one leg, I would cramp so badly that the bike would go down, I would go down. And so Rajiv knew enough not to try and help me, because I'd be disqualified. And I was like, no, stay there. So anyway, a bit of a disaster. But then I found out that the girls didn't make the bike cut off after that. So I thought, well, one of us has got to finish. I was really just doing it for fun, theoretically. It was so hot. And the run was 3 laps up a hill. Do you know Goa at all? Anyway, it was up a hill to the governor's house and down the hill 3 times. So it's 21 Ks, just up a hill, downhill, up a hill, downhill, in the heat. with very little shade. That's the whole thing about not being able to get enough water on board. My stomach was, you know, I felt like I was 9 months pregnant, but I still couldn't get any water into me. It was, you know, I couldn't get enough water into me. Anyway, sadly enough, at the end of that, I was the only 65 to 69-year-old silly enough to do this sort of race. So, of course, I won my age group, and that meant I qualified for the World Championships in Lake Taupo in New Zealand. So suddenly I found myself back into competitive triathlon, world championships. You know, I felt like a complete fraud. And as it turned out, I felt like a complete fraud over there as well. I think I was the only person who didn't have, you know, kind of profile bars on my bike because I hadn't trained with them here. So I thought no point in, you know, risking my life over there with profile bars, which you sort of get down on a bike. Long story. But anyway, so the point being, I left triathlon, got a certain level of excellence, and then found myself back up, you know, where I'm supposed to perform at a similar kind of level of excellence with people my age. I honestly, because I've never seen myself as an athlete, as someone who's good at anything. I don't feel like I don't have any regrets about not having reached Olympic level or something, because that was never going to happen. I just wanted to do something else that was an adventure and see if I could do that, see if I could, if my body, my mind, whatever would let me. But moreover, something that's fun, something that's out in nature, something that's, you know, using your body out in nature. That's what was always driving me. Not, you know, for a minute when I was in triathlon, it was about getting better, getting faster, but not, I'm the least competitive person I know in many ways. I mean, if someone starts coming up behind me, I'll just let them go because the only person I'm racing is myself. So triathlon was a perfect sport for me because you know, I look at people in the Olympics like, oh my God, how fabulous that they can do that. But that's not me. My gig is just, what else can I do with this body for as long as I can?
Beautiful. I mean, in some ways, again, back to the power of saying yes. You said yes to a company helping this friend of yours. And again, look at where it's
What happened?
brought to you, full circle moment. Another thing you said, I want to ask you is you talked about how you liked moving your body
Mm,
in nature.
mm.
What does that give you?
Oh, peace. Peace. I mean, it's the only time, particularly in water, if I'm on, in, or around water, it's just bliss for me. That's as close as I get to Nevada, I think. It's just something about that. And I guess being Australian, it drives some of that. But I just, and you know, I'm sitting here, sorry, but I can't help looking outside because we've got a swimming pool and the birds come and drink in the swimming pool often. Now, if you told me 40 years ago that I would enjoy bird watching, you'd be like, yeah, as if. But I'm loving watching birds, you know, and that's all part of being in nature, being around nature, learning new things again.
Coming to the end of this conversation, Susan, I have this thing I call the ageless round. So my first question is, what does being ageless mean to you?
I think it probably means not being defined by context, not being defined by someone saying, at your age, you should be like this. Or someone saying to my 92-year-old mother-in-law, you're doing quite well. You're doing very well. You're doing amazingly for a 92-year-old. No, she's just doing amazingly, actually. It doesn't matter what it's fabulous that chronologically that she's still pushing along. But, you know, to me, and I've been really spoiled because because I grew up in the Air Force and because I traveled so much in my life and I've been lucky enough to live in 2 different places overseas. I don't see the people I went to primary school with. I don't see the people I went to kindergarten with. And I know a lot of people in Delhi who do. And, you know, I think they dumb each other down rather than building each other up. It's too easy to be comfortable, to fall into the paradigm of what that person next to you is doing. They're your age. Oh, maybe I should slow down, whatever. But Rajiv and I hang out with a lot of younger people, not because we don't like people our own age, we do, but in terms of the way we're living our lives, probably we would be doing stuff more with the younger people. So I think being ageless means that you don't think about your age. It's like being colorblind, or you know, sort of colorblind. I'm meaning in terms of racism. You know, you don't stop and
Maybe
think that
age
person's
blind,
brown, that person's sorry.
maybe age blind. You know,
Age
so
blind,
yeah,
yeah, age blind, indeed, and not. It doesn't even enter. It doesn't enter my mind. You know how old. I find it difficult judging people's ages actually, because I don't focus on that. if that makes sense. So, but for me, I'm fixated in my 24th year. I hate the person I see in a mirror. If I go past him, I'm like, oh my God, who's that person? Because that's not what I see in me. That's just this thing in the mirror. And it's just unfortunate that the body is not like, and the face is not keeping up with the rest of my self-image. But I think there's nothing wrong with not growing up. I intend to grow old disgracefully.
And I should probably title this episode. This might just be the winning line, which is, yeah, there's nothing wrong with not growing up. Susan, a related question, which is, what does society get wrong about aging?
Again, I think it comes back to definitions and context. You know, we're very quick to put people into little boxes. You're 50, so you should be like this. You're 60, so you should be like that. You're 70, so you should be like that, or acting like that. I think it's breaking down very quickly. But in India, there's a lot of things that come with that, like the whole of the structure of Indian society and what it means to age is breaking down. There's a lot more nuclear families now. There's a lot more need for care of older people because they're not being kept within the family grouping. And frankly, a lot of, kind of, without being too serious about it, but ill treatment of older people, or not taking enough care of them from a societal perspective, because they are so important. They have so much to give. And we should be doing everything we can to keep them active, to keep them being able to keep contributing rather than shunning them away in a corner and not providing adequate facilities or giving them, just some motivation. Actually, I think it's stopped now, but there used to be televised yoga classes by Patanjali, whatever the guy's name is. And I thought they were brilliant. Okay, some of it was good, some of it wasn't appropriate, but at least it gave people access to that because most people have a television or a smartphone or something. But as a society, India is not looking after its age, not taking a policy perspective on aging, yet society is breaking down faster for aging people in this country than anywhere else in the world, I suspect, because we've had such a strong joint family
Sure.
culture and now it's just not happening.
Yeah, picked up on all these facets, the historical lineage, and also things that are changing so quickly in your time in India. Susan, from all things that we can see, I mean, you are just full of vitality. You have all these goals in front of you. But is there something that scares you about your own aging ahead of you?
Excuse me. I really would not like to pass the way my mother passed. And if I'm honest, that's scary because she wasn't able to speak at the end. Yeah, she wasn't in control of her life. As far as that's probably more death, but as far as aging is concerned, I'm not fond of the wrinkles. I'm not fond of the body sagging. I'm not fond of those sorts of things, but I'm still able to do stuff. And I guess it doesn't scare me that I won't be able to do that stuff because I can't foresee a time when I wouldn't be. As long as I keep applying myself and, look at, again, my 92-year-old mother-in-law, there's no reason why I can't keep doing stuff for a very long time. So that doesn't scare me. We all die. So when that happens, I would much rather have a really good, fulfilling life than live to, 100 and be not able to use this body.
Last part of the conversation, Susan, it's the rapid fire round. And I'm going to drop these expressions at you, and you just have to give me a single word answer. And please don't,
Single word.
yeah,
Oh,
please
okay.
don't think about it. Just whatever comes to your mind, just articulate.
Is
So
any
if you're
psychologist
ready,
going to be monitoring this at any point?
I mean, who knows who's going to listen to this, but nobody's going to be evaluating you for anything. They're only going to be
Okay.
enjoying the chat. Okay.
Okay.
Discipline is,
Focus.
fear is,
Damaging.
recovery is,
Essential.
competition is,
Healthy.
aging is,
Necessary.
adventure is,
Critical.
home is,
Comforting.
next is.
English Channel.
Ah, amazing.
I don't
Love
know why
it.
I just said that. I don't know why I said that because it's not yet planned, and it's been
Okay.
hanging around for a long time on the bucket list. And I I really don't know why I said that, but maybe if my subconscious said it, maybe it's time to focus on it. I've been enjoying all my long distance open water swims, and maybe that's what I'm going to do next.
Beautiful. I feel fortunate that you dropped us with the next thing we get to cheer you on for.
Let's hope I do it. But can I
Stephen,
ask you a
thanks.
question now? May I ask you
Go
a
ahead.
question? Where's
Go
your
ahead.
favorite surfing? Where is your favorite surfing break?
There are so many incredible breaks in the world. The one that I love the most is this fickle and violent and temperamental and occasionally very beautiful beach right by San Francisco called Ocean Beach. It's where I learned to surf.
Isn't it cold?
It's very cold, and it's very cold. It's very shorky. And like I said, it's very fickle. We only have a few days of lined up swell, and you're way more likely to get beaten down than actually get a lot of rides. But there's something absolutely magical about having this element right next to this crazy urban big city and being able to just go down there and escape from everything else and catch a few waves.
Wow, that's brilliant.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless.